Maria moved quietly through the opulent hotel lobby, her hands steady as she wiped the surface of a polished table. The soft clink of glasses and hum of polished conversations filled the air, but she stayed focused on her task. Her uniform was crisply ironed but simple, a stark contrast to the glittering dresses and tailored suits around her. She was tired, her feet aching from hours on them, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity. This was her world, a place that both fascinated and intimidated her, and tonight, she wished only to remain invisible. The grand chandelier scattered light across the room as wealthy guests sipped cocktails and exchanged polite, rehearsed laughter. Maria's skin, bronzed and smooth from days in the sun back home, glowed softly in the warm light. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and though there was nothing flashy about her appearance, there was resilience in her eyes. She was someone who had learned to hold her own, no matter the circumstances. Across the room, Richard lounged arrogantly by the bar, a glass of scotch in one hand and a smug smile playing on his lips. His tailored jacket and perfectly styled hair marked him as someone used to getting what he wanted, often at the expense of others. From his vantage point, he spotted Maria. A small, dismissive laugh escaped him as he waved over a companion. "Look at her," he said loudly, voice dripping with condescension. "Do you really think she belongs here? She's barely out of the kitchen." Head subtly turned. The words were louder now, the line between jest and insult blurring. Maria's grip tightened on the cloth. She forced herself not to meet his gaze as the first whispers of ridicule began to ripple through the gathering. The rich man's sneer was the opening shot of a battle she hadn't asked for but was about to face. Richard's mocking words echoed in the air, sharper now as he stepped closer, his voice carrying to a growing cluster of nearby guests. "Tell me, Maria," he called out, deliberately mispronouncing her name with exaggerated emphasis. "Do you understand the finer things here? Or is all this just noise and flash to you, like the dull hum of those machines you probably know so well?" He gestured dismissively toward a nearby gleaming espresso machine behind the bar, smirking as if his insult was guaranteed applause. Maria's shoulders straightened, but her eyes remained downcast. The polished lobby, once a place where she moved silently and respectfully, now held an uncomfortable spotlight. She bit her lip, swallowing the sting of humiliation. Around her, laughter bubbled unevenly, some forced, others genuine, but the atmosphere had stiffened with the unease of wealthy onlookers unsure how to respond. One of Richard's companions, a young man dressed in a crisp navy blazer, chuckled and added, "Honestly, I don't see why she's even cleaning here tonight. Shouldn't someone like her just stick to the back rooms where she belongs?" The comment drew more grins and whispers, widening the circle of spectators. Maria took a quiet breath, brushing her hands against her sides as if to shake off the invisible weight pressing down. "Sir," she said softly, meeting Richard's eyes for a brief moment, "I have every right to be here. But I came to do my job." Her voice was steady but carried the hint of exhaustion and indignity. Richard laughed again, louder this time, the kind of laugh that drowned out those nearby. "Oh, you came to do your job all right. But do you think this is a place for you to be noticed? We pay for exclusivity, and you're just part of the scenery." His words were slicing through the polite chatter like a knife. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some averting their gazes, others whispering amongst themselves. A woman in a sparkling silver dress glanced sideways at Maria with sympathy in her eyes, but said nothing. Another man, clearly amused, took a sip of his champagne and smirked openly. Maria's throat tightened. Normally, she might have tried to slip away unnoticed, but Richard's words held her in place. She was caught in this moment, standing small amidst the grandeur and cruelty. "Why don't you try answering a question?" Richard taunted, stepping forward so only she could hear. "If you're so clever, maybe you can tell us what makes a hotel like this truly luxurious. Or are you only capable of dusting and wiping?" The cruel challenge pinned her like a weight. She opened her mouth, hesitating, but Richard only grinned, clearly enjoying the power play. Some guests frowned now, sensing a line had been crossed, but the social game was already in motion. Maria felt their eyes piercing her, a mixture of judgment and curiosity. Then, her phone vibrated sharply against her hip. A sudden hush seemed to fall over the gathered crowd. Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, glancing briefly at the caller ID before answering. The unexpected noise and movement broke the tension in an odd way. She lifted the phone to her ear. "Hello?" Her voice was different now, clear, confident, and flowing naturally as she switched effortlessly into her native tongue, a melodic and ancient language few in the room recognized. Richard's amused expression faltered as he caught the unfamiliar sound. His eyes narrowed. On the call, Maria's tone was serious as she answered questions about a community project dedicated to preserving cultural heritage, discussing intricate details with ease and authority. Her voice carried a palpable conviction, her knowledge laying bare. Her hands, which earlier gripped the cleaning cloth, now gestured subtly, reflecting the deep understanding she had cultivated over years. The crowd gradually hushed, drawn in by the unexpected turn. Whispers rippled through the room as guests turned toward her, now intrigued rather than dismissive. The air buzzed with surprise. Several guests moved closer, curious and respectful. A distinguished-looking woman whispered to her companion, "I had no idea. She speaks like a scholar." Richard's face flushed crimson. He shifted uneasily, folding his arms, as if suddenly aware of the vast gap between his assumption and the reality standing before him. Maria stayed on the phone for a few more minutes, handling complex questions and explaining initiatives with eloquence and passion. The elegant lobby, which earlier had felt cold and hostile, now framed her in a new light. When she finally ended the call, there was a moment of silence. Then, a tentative round of applause began from some of the more progressive guests, growing steadily. One guest, an older man with kind eyes and silver hair, leaned forward to say, "You carry yourself with such grace, Maria. I think many of us misjudged you." Maria smiled faintly, the burden lifting as the crowd's mood shifted. The sense of humiliation from moments ago softened into a surprising sense of pride and belonging. Richard opened his mouth, perhaps to protest or reclaim his dominance, but no words came. His usual bluster was muted, replaced by a simmering rage cloaked in embarrassment. The event's host approached him quietly and whispered in his ear, prompting Richard to take a step back, momentarily subdued. As Maria gathered her cleaning supplies, guests approached to offer quiet congratulations or simply nod in respect. Their eyes, once indifferent or mocking, now acknowledged her worth. Yet, the sting of Richard's initial cruelty lingered beneath the surface, a reminder of the social gap still yawning between them. Maria knew this moment was just one small victory in a larger struggle. Leaving the spotlight behind, she made her way toward the back of the lobby. Her heart was steadier now, but a question burned quietly inside. How much longer must she prove her worth to those who refused to see it clearly from the start? Several guests continued to glance back, their admiration unmistakable. Others, uncomfortable, averted their gazes. Maria took a deep breath and stepped away, determined that her dignity would outshine any insult thrown her way. The room buzzed with renewed conversation, the memory of the earlier incident transformed into a lesson whispered among the guests. Some debated Richard's arrogance, others marveled at Maria's unexpected depth. In that moment, surrounded by luxury yet moving with the humble grace she always possessed, Maria realized that her strength came not from wealth or status, but from the quiet power of knowing who she truly was. As she disappeared into the shadows behind the pillar, she wondered silently what the next challenge might hold, because this was far from over. The night spotlight had shifted, but the story was still unfolding. If you found yourself in Maria's place, confronted so publicly with scorn, how would you respond? Would you walk away quietly or find a way to rise above? The hum of attentive whispers filled the room as Maria stood still, phone in hand, the last syllable hanging in the air like a soft melody. Her voice, now silenced, had unveiled something no one had expected, behind the plain uniform and weary eyes lay a woman whose mind was sharp, whose roots ran deep, and whose knowledge stretched far beyond the world of cleaning and service. Richard's face was a study in shifts, confusion first, as if parsing what he had just heard, then disbelief. His arrogant posture faltered slightly, and for a moment, he was a man stripped bare of the armor his wealth and privilege had always given him. The guests, those who had moments before laughed at Maria, now exchanged stunned glances. Some held their breath, others teetered on the edge of applause. "She speaks that language so beautifully," a woman murmured, her voice hushed with awe. "I read somewhere it's nearly extinct. I had no idea someone here knew it." Maria gently lowered her phone, eyes sweeping across the room. There was a calmness in her gaze, a quiet command that made it clear she was ready to speak more if needed. The crowd shifted expectantly. This was no longer the shy cleaner they had first seen. This was a woman capable of capturing their attention with something far richer than teasing words. Richard cleared his throat, voice taut and strained as he attempted to regain some measure of control. "So, what exactly do you do, Maria?" he demanded, the skepticism barely veiling his irritation. "You're a cleaner, right? That's what you told us." A collective breath was drawn in the room, sensing that this moment was pivotal. Maria smiled faintly but firmly, stepping forward with steady grace. "I am a cultural ambassador and a scholar," she said with quiet pride. "I work to preserve and promote my people's language and traditions. The work you heard me discussing is part of a larger effort to keep our heritage alive." Some guests nodded slowly, processing this revelation. The contrast between Richard's pompous dismissal and Maria's true identity was striking, the disparity almost painful to witness. Richard laughed nervously, attempting a scoff, but it came across hollow and forced. "So you're some kind of academic? Not just a cleaner?" "That's right," Maria replied. "Today, I was asked to do my job here, and I did. But tonight, I am also a guest with a purpose connected to a charity event supported by this hotel. My role is more than what meets the eye." There was a hush, the realization settling like a chill. The very people who had judged her so quickly now saw themselves caught off guard by their own bias. A young man, one of the hotel's regular patrons, stepped beside Maria with a warm smile. "You've taught us all a lesson tonight. Sometimes, the best knowledge is hidden in the most unexpected places." The applause began slowly, then swelled. Hands clapped with genuine admiration and respect. Richard shifted uncomfortably, a flush spreading over his cheeks. More guests came forward, engaging Maria in questions about her community and her work. She answered with ease, her passion lighting up her eyes. She spoke of her people's struggles, their rich history, and the urgent need to protect a tongue that could vanish within a generation. The words fell like seeds in fertile ground, and the crowd seemed eager to learn. Richard scowled, beaten for once by a story he had never considered. His companions exchanged embarrassed looks, silent now where they had been bold before. Later, when the host approached Richard privately, there was a sharp, whispered admonition that was clear enough without words. Richard's pride was bruised, his usual air of superiority diminished. Meanwhile, Maria's presence continued to draw people in. Many sought her out to express admiration, some even embarrassed by their earlier laughter, others eager to hear more of the cultural tales she shared with such heartfelt conviction. Though the burden of earlier humiliation still weighed lightly on her, Maria's spirit had shifted. Tonight, she had demonstrated the strength that comes not from privilege but from authenticity and knowledge. She had turned a sneer into a moment of revelation, a taunt into testimony. As the evening moved forward, Maria quietly retreated behind the scenes, but the impression she left behind rippled through the event like a gentle tide. Conversations sparked anew, and the atmosphere took on a more thoughtful, inclusive tone. Back in her simple quarters later, Maria allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought about the faces she had seen, the judgments quickly made and then undone. She understood the power of preconceptions, and the courage it took to shatter them. She smiled softly, knowing this story was far from finished. But for now, she had stood tall in her truth. And that was victory enough. The guests would remember tonight, not just for the cocktails and chatter, but for the moment when a quiet hotel cleaner had leveled a room with nothing but her words and her unwavering grace. What might you have done, faced with such disrespect? Would you have held your head high as Maria did, or found another path to claim your dignity? Later that week, the hotel's grand sitting room buzzed with a gathering far more intimate than the chaotic cocktail event Maria had traversed just days before. A small crowd had assembled to hear from one of their own, a woman whose presence had caught many off guard and whose story was now drawing in guests eager to understand. As she entered, dressed simply as always in modest fabrics that bore the subtle signs of hardware, Maria's gait held an effortless confidence. It was this quiet strength that belied the complexity of her life. No longer just the hotel cleaner or the unexpected guest, she was a woman whose roots and journeys intertwined in ways few could guess at. Leaning into a supportive circle of friends and those newly interested in her story, Maria began to open up, revealing parts of herself carefully guarded until now. "My name," she said softly, "is Maria Hernandez. I am a cultural ambassador for an indigenous community far from here, one whose voices and stories have been muted for far too long. The language you heard me speak is the heart of our identity. It's a language I learned from my grandparents, passed down through generations." A ripple of fascination spread through the room. Some nodded knowingly, others listened with wide eyes. Maria explained that for years, she had traveled under the radar, choosing to lead a humble life even as her work gained international recognition in academic and cultural circles. Her dedication to preserving her people's heritage meant often stepping into unfamiliar spaces, sometimes dressed plainly to avoid drawing unwelcome attention, or perhaps to ensure she remained a serviceable part of everyday life. It was a purposeful camouflage that enabled her to connect with diverse communities without the barriers her title might have created. "It's not just about language," she continued, "but about identity, history, and survival. To preserve what is precious, we must sometimes walk quietly through the halls of privilege and expectation, listening and learning as much as teaching." She paused, her dark eyes reflecting the soft glow of the chandelier overhead. "But," Maria said, a trace of warmth returning to her voice, "that does not mean we are invisible. Not today, and not ever." Her audience, a blend of wealthy patrons, hotel staff, and curious locals, sat captivated. Questions came quickly, sincere and respectful. How did she reconcile her dual worlds? What had motivated her journey? How did she cope with moments like that evening when ridicule stung sharpest? Maria took each in stride, describing a life shaped by contrasts, of hardship and opportunity, of tradition and modernity. She spoke gently of her upbringing in a small mountain village where stories were currency, and knowledge was the thread weaving people into community. She described the sacrifices made by her family to send her to school, the late nights studying under flickering lamps, and the friends who doubted she would ever leave. Yet she also spoke of the moments when she chose simplicity, of dressing plainly, of taking jobs far beneath what her education and connections warranted. She said this was a choice, one that grounded her and reminded her of the people she represented. "I wanted to be with the people, not above them," she confided, "to understand their daily struggles as well as their dreams." A woman in the crowd, young and eager, asked gently, "But after all you've achieved, does it hurt when people still judge you by your appearance?" Maria's smile was quiet but certain. "It does. But it also strengthens my resolve. True respect isn't given lightly. It is earned through consistency, through standing firm even when others see only the surface." Throughout the gathering, those who knew her from the hotel, staff who had once wondered about the quiet woman who swept past them, now looked at her anew, with appreciation and pride. The story of that evening had spread, and Maria's narrative fused seamlessly with the event's mission, to broaden horizons and challenge assumptions. When asked about Richard, Maria responded with a gentle diplomacy that surprised some. "He represents a view many still hold," she said thoughtfully. But moments like that remind us that kindness and openness must replace judgment. I hope he learned something, not just about me, but about the power of empathy. Maria's revealing of her true self, her history, and her mission rippled through the hotel and beyond like a quiet revolution. It deepened her character from a figure of sympathy to a woman of influence, someone who walked between worlds with grace and unshakable purpose. As the evening ended, many guests lingered, eager to connect, to listen more deeply, and to rethink their own assumptions about status and worth. Maria stepped out into the night air, her heart steady, thoughts turning toward the work ahead. She wore no cloak of pretense nor armor of arrogance, only the truth of who she was. And though she looked like any other woman passing through the city streets, those who truly knew her understood the depth beneath the surface, a depth that no luxury or insult could touch. The journey was ongoing. The challenges remained, but so did Maria's quiet strength and the unshakable belief that dignity comes not from recognition but from living with purpose. The stories she carried were now hers to share, unraveling with each encounter in ways that might one day change the world's perception, one voice, one heart, one language at a time. Weeks after the evening that had turned the hotel's glittering lobby upside down, the consequences of Richard's arrogance began to ripple through the corridors of the establishment. The hotel management, having received numerous complaints from guests disturbed by his behavior, decided it was time to take firm action. Richard was summoned to a private meeting with the general manager, a woman known for her firm but fair approach to conflict. As Richard sat in the sleek office, the weight of the situation pressed against his usual air of entitlement. The manager wasted no time. "Mr. Carlyle," she began, her tone professional but cold, "your conduct last week during our event was unacceptable. Publicly humiliating our staff is not tolerated here, especially not in front of our guests." She slid a document across the polished desk. "We're placing you on a probationary status, limiting your access to exclusive events and privileges. Any further incidents will lead to termination of your membership." The word struck Richard harder than he anticipated. His pride bristled, but beneath it simmered a reluctant acceptance. His behavior had consequences, and the hotel was making it clear that wealth did not grant him immunity from respect. For once, he faced the repercussions of his actions alone. Meanwhile, news of the incident had spread beyond the hotel's walls. Social media buzzed with admiration for Maria, the cleaner who had disarmed mockery with dignity and intellect. Local cultural organizations reached out, inviting her to speak at events and share her invaluable knowledge. Maria found herself at the center of a growing movement to celebrate indigenous languages and traditions. One afternoon, as she sorted through emails at the small desk in her shared apartment, Maria's phone buzzed. It was an unexpected call from the hotel's management. With cautious curiosity, she answered. "Ms. Hernandez, on behalf of the hotel, we want to express our sincere apologies for the disrespect you endured," the manager said earnestly. "We recognize the injustice and would like to offer you compensation for your time and efforts, as well as an invitation to collaborate on future cultural events hosted by the hotel." Maria felt a swell of appreciation. The apology was genuine, the acknowledgement a balm to the indignities she had faced. She accepted their offer, knowing that partnerships like these could help amplify the voices of her community and give her work greater reach. At a reception organized in her honor, many familiar faces gathered, hotel staff who had witnessed her courage, guests who had admired her wisdom, and activists inspired by her story. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, a stark contrast to the tension of that fateful night. Richard was notably absent. As Maria mingled, she noticed a few subdued glances from the usual elite crowd, some still grappling with their own discomfort, others quietly admiring her poise. She navigated the room with grace, exchanging heartfelt conversations about culture, language, and resilience. Later, stepping outside into the cool evening air, Maria reflected on how far she had come. From the quiet woman who had once sought only to do her work unnoticed, she was now a voice for her people and a symbol of strength against prejudice. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Richard, not with bitterness but with a quiet understanding. Perhaps, she mused, the greatest victories come not in overturning others but in standing firm in one's truth. As she looked up at the twinkling city lights, a gentle resolve settled inside her. There was still much work ahead, but Maria faced it with open eyes and an unbowed spirit. To those watching her journey unfold, what would you have done in Maria's place? Would you have found the courage to turn humiliation into empowerment? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We learn so much from each other's strength and grace. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of resilience and redemption. See you in our next story.